I'm Richard Stedd, and I'm a member of the International Hydrofoil Society, and this presentation is part of my personal history with hydrofoils. From February 1969 until September 17, 1971, I had the privilege to serve aboard the U.S. Navy's first fleet operational hydrofoil gunboat, Tucumcari, PGH-2. I say privilege because in 1969, there were only 2 hydrofoil gunboats in the Navy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Some background information is in order. After enlisting in the Navy in 1965, I graduated from college and then went on to Officer Candidate School, where I became an ensign in February 1966. From there, I was ordered to the USS Agile, MSO 421, as the engineering officer. After 2 years in that position and 2 deployments, I was qualified as an officer of the deck for all underway operations of a U.S. Navy ship. I then spent a year in the Intelligence Division of Commander Mine Forces Atlantic Fleet. In the fall of 1968, I received orders to become the new officer in charge of Tucumcari. I reported aboard Tucumcari in February 1969, and after 2 months of training and 1 additional month of overhaul for Tucumcari, I took command while we were in dry dock. It really wasn't the best timing for me because the first time I brought Tucumcari alongside the pier, I looked over my shoulder for approval and there wasn't anybody there. She was all mine, right or wrong, she was all mine. And it was a great feeling, I gotta tell you. 82 feet long, hull-borne propulsion was by a small water jet propulsion system with max speed of 6 knots. And if we were going downhill, might have squeezed out 7 knots. Foil-borne propulsion was a water jet moving approximately 120 tons of water per minute through 2 nozzles, creating 24,000 pounds of thrust, providing a cruising speed of 42 knots. Fixed armament, 40 millimeter mount forward, 81 millimeter mortar aft, 2 twin 50 caliber machine gun mounts amidships, and there were also numerous small arms stored on board. Some of the fixed armaments were later modified and improved in 1971. For the next 2 months, we did all of the normal operations of the other naval elements, except that we did them faster and we got home sooner. Tucumcari was deemed fleet operational, but we also had some dog and pony shows, as we called them, for visiting dignitaries and their aides. Tucumcari was unique and everyone wanted to ride. In July 1969, the calendar brought us a surprise. We'd been told we would go to Vietnam. My first move was to cancel my offer to buy a house, which I made just 2 days before. Next, I had several crew members that had orders to be transferred out before we were leaving. We needed replacements fast, and we needed combat training even faster. Few had any familiarity with the weaponry on board, so we immediately scheduled a gunnery exercise, or a gun-ex, at San Clemente Island, the Navy's gunnery exercise range off the coast of San Diego. And as the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. Sure enough, the dog and pony element interfered. Borg Warner, the maker of Tucumcari's hydrofoil water jet propulsion, requested to film Tucumcari's water jet system in operation. Fortunately, we were able to accomplish both the training and the filming on the same day. Now, if you are old enough to remember the 1970s NBC News show, First Tuesday, you probably saw Borg Warner's commercial narrated by Lloyd Bridges. It's probably out there somewhere on the internet, and you can see it. Although we originally considered the filming an inconvenience, we were pleased to learn things about Tucumcari from our taping of the commercial. When we scheduled the gun-ex, we planned a full fuel load and a full combat load to simulate the conditions in Vietnam. The lesson we learned on that hot and humid day in San Diego was that we needed to modify our hydrofoil takeoff operations in the July sun. We changed our normal takeoff operation procedure in preparation for the hotter and more humid climate of Vietnam. We didn't feel so bad about the filming after we learned that valuable lesson. Now, before I get into our Vietnam mission, I'd like to clarify the purpose of a hydrofoil gunboat. There's been some misconception about the mission of the hydrofoil gunboats in Vietnam. Partially, it's been distorted by the term gunboat and by the artwork used to sell the scale models of Tucumcari, which you may have seen in stores or on eBay. The artwork shows her engaged in a firefight close to shore. The picture is not an authentic representation of our purpose or our mission. Both Tucumcari and the other hydrofoil gunboat, Flagstaff, had a draft of approximately 14 feet, which limited our operation to coastal patrol rather than river patrols. Now, as for our Vietnam mission, both Tucumcari and Flagstaff were sent to Da Nang. That was the northernmost harbor on the Tonkin Gulf coast of what was then South Vietnam. There, we operated under the command of Commander Task Force 115.1. Our orders were relatively simple. Each hydrofoil was to be on call and ready to patrol for 5 days straight, 24 hours a day. At the end of the 5-day shift, the other hydrofoil took over for 5 days. Our patrol area was all of I-Corps. From the coast outward 12 miles, from the northern end, which was the demilitarized zone, or the DMZ, and the southern end was a point at the north end of 2 Corps, roughly 600 miles south of the DMZ. The entire area was broken up into 6 patrol zones, and each zone would be that we would patrol was provided to us in coded radio traffic when we received our orders to get underway. Once we received those orders, we were expected to be underway within 15 minutes and to be on station at our first checkpoint no later than 15 minutes thereafter. Our mission was to track and intercept all traffic in the zone, report location, course, speed, type of craft, and any unusual information. At the end of each patrol, the skipper would report back to the task force commander for debriefing. Any refueling, rearming, replenishment, or repairs had to be done immediately in preparation for our next notice of a patrol. During our deployment, Tucumcari only failed to meet her station. Tucumcari only failed to reach her station once, and it was my fault. It was during the monsoon season, and my belief was that Tucumcari was invincible and could become foil-borne in any weather. Sadly, my faith was misplaced. I attempted to take off in extreme weather, and as a consequence, the Tucumcari suffered a mechanical failure that kept us down for several days. To this day, I still think I could have made it with better planning if I hadn't been so eager to push the limits. Anyway, coastal patrols can run from boring to fascinating, from humor to fear, from relaxation to anxiety. It was never the same. However, there's always a day or two that you remember, and we had one that was our most adventurous, a day that was never anticipated and was never repeated. It was Monday morning, February 9th, 1970. Flagstaff was down for maintenance, and we were off patrol. I got a call from the task force commander to come in for a briefing. Intelligence believed that a Soviet trawler, we designated it an AGI, was in the area of I-Corps. We were ordered to get underway, find the AGI, and advise where it was. Within 20 minutes, we were underway. As we transited the harbor, I had my navigator set up a special search grid. 20 minutes after we were underway, we radioed the task force commander that we found the trawler inside of Vietnam's 12-mile limit and requested instructions. All I got, unfortunately, was a standby. Now, at the time, the rules of engagement that were in effect meant that U.S. forces were not allowed to initiate any action without accompanying Vietnam forces, unless we had been fired upon. If we were fired upon, no problem. But we couldn't do anything with our own initiative, and the term for that was Vietnamization. You may remember that term. Anyway, while standing by, I used the international rules of the road and the remarkable maneuvering ability of Tucumcari to freeze the trawler and keep it from leaving the area. Of course, the people on the AGI were probably also interested in this strange-looking craft that was limiting its movement. After a frustratingly long time of just burning daylight, I again radioed for instructions and again got another "stand by." Frustration on my part increased. I could be caught up in an international incident and I needed guidance. In the interim, I prepared the crew for how we would bring the trawler into Da Nang. Of course, that's when I got my orders. We were to proceed to rendezvous with a U.S. Navy oiler for refueling. I radioed back and I said, I have enough fuel, and I requested further instructions. Now, you know you've said the wrong thing when your parent repeats to you exactly what they just told you to do. My coded response was, aye, aye, sir. And as I tucked my tail between my legs and left to refuel, 4 Vietnam Navy patrol boats came out of Da Nang heading straight for the trawler. Meanwhile, I set a course for the oiler and asked my crew if anyone other than me had ever refueled at sea. The answer was a frightening, a what? No, sir. Of all the things we trained for, this was not one of them. When you're in small craft operations and in special warfare, you don't usually refuel at sea. After a quick conference with a bosun and an engineer and a few others, we created a refueling at sea detail. Back on the bridge, I took the con, got my course and speed for refueling, and took the Tucumcari alongside the oiler for the first refueling underway of a hydrofoil from a conventional oiler. Not only was it successful, but it was fun too. Afterward, we went back to where the 4 Vietnamese gunboats had gone after the trawler, but there was no sign of any of them. I just concluded the trawler headed for the open sea once we left the area, and the Vietnamese Navy lost the chase. After that, it was back to normal patrols and a few eventful matters. When we got back to San Diego, Tucumcari went into minor repair phase, while most of us took a well-deserved rest. And while most of us were so engaged, the rumor started that Tucumcari would be changing home ports to the East Coast. Sure enough, the scuttlebutt, which is also another way to say a Navy rumor, was true. Tuc was moving to Little Creek, Virginia, the East Coast headquarters of Naval Special Warfare. I gave the crew the option of staying in San Diego or moving to the East Coast. Unfortunately, by the time we left, I had lost over half my crew and most of my support team. All prior cross-training had been lost and we needed to start over. But the rumor was bigger than we knew. We were going on a NATO cruise. This was big. This was the big show. Tucumcari needed a total makeover. New paint from the metal up. It was showtime, all spit and polish in true Bristol fashion. My problem was that I had already been aboard almost 2 years, the standard rotation for a sea tour, and I expected to be transferred, and my relief was nowhere in sight, and nowhere in sight for training. Did the Navy drop the ball, or did someone want me there? I wasn't sure which. My new Commodore in Virginia, who also happened to be my next door neighbor, convinced me to extend for the NATO cruise. My response was, oh, please, Brer Bear, please don't throw me in that there briar patch. Well, next stop, Europe. First port, Copenhagen, Denmark. We operated with the Danes regarding mine warfare and demonstrated the sensitivity of our acoustic and magnetic signatures to mines. In West Germany, we didn't do much in West Virginia either. In West Germany, we operated with the Germans' Jaguar-class patrol boats in a joint operation with the Norwegians and the Danes. We transited the Kiel Canal and then crossed the English Channel. In the United Kingdom, we conducted operations with the Royal Navy in various ports with their Broadswordsman-class patrol boats. Then back to the continent, across the Channel to Brest. In Brest, France, we conducted tests with the French Navy regarding the effect of a simulated launch of a missile from a foil-borne hydrofoil. We sailed from Brest, France to Toulon, France around the Straits of Gibraltar. We refueled underway from the USS WOOD COUNTY, who was our mothership during the cruise. Going through the Straits of Gibraltar at night at 16 knots was exciting, even though I'd been through there before. This time I was a skipper, and it was magical. And by the way, you have to go through at 16 knots because the Brits who control Gibraltar don't like the idea of someone coming through there at 40 knots. They tend to take a dim view of people going too fast. Anyway, we arrived in Toulon late at night, where the liaison officer for our group advised me that I had orders to sail on to Gaeta, Italy. And I had to do it immediately to meet with Com-6 Fleet. My problem was that Tucumcari didn't have enough fuel to get there. My sole fuel source was the Wood County and wouldn't arrive until the next day. And sailor, let me tell you, one does not refuse to sail to meet an admiral even when you're out of fuel. Unfortunately for Com-6 Fleet, at that time known as Admiral Kidd, but fortunately for me, we had commitments with the French Navy that apparently overrode Admiral Kidd's need to see me, and so we first had to do several demonstrations for the French in Toulon before sailing to Gaeta. When we got to Gaeta, the Admiral, it turned out, was not happy with me, and after an uneventful and tasty lunch aboard his flagship, he proceeded to give me his unvarnished opinion of me and my crew. First, he reminded me that I had an engine malfunction while in Germany, and second, 5 of my crew members had gotten drunk one night in Germany and decided they had been attacked by a Volkswagen Beetle. Now, obviously, the only remedy for such an attack on drunken sailors was to throw the Volkswagen car into a creek. All the miscreants were disciplined, though insufficiently, I might add. And of course, because it happened on my watch, it was my fault, and the Admiral wanted my scalp. Fortunately for me, none of these issues arose under the Admiral's command, that is. And all of it did hasten my resolve to become a civilian sooner than later. Back aboard Tucumcari, we headed for Naples, Italy, and a surprise visit there from my boss, Confiblant Admiral Bell, who, as it happened, was not happy with me because he had been chewed out by Admiral Kidd, because Admiral Bell, who was my boss, and thus Admiral Bell, was also responsible for the engine breakdown and for those drunken sailors. It flows downhill, you see. After several operations in Naples, we left for Turkey. It was quite exciting going through the Dardanelles to the Turkish naval base. We had several demonstrations there for a few days for the Turkish Navy, and then back through the Dardanelles to Brindisi on the east coast of Italy, where we conducted aircraft evasion tactics with the Italians' air forces. I had not been trained as a pilot, and as my predecessor, just as my predecessor had been, so it was fortunate that my relief showed up just in time to help with evasion tactics. The new skipper-to-be was waiting for us on the pier when we arrived in Brindisi, and he was indeed a former pilot. You might take note that when you upset 2 admirals, it's amazing how fast they can get someone to relieve you. Anyway, from Brindisi, we went back to Naples to pick up some Italian Navy personnel who were going to evaluate our sea state ability while we made our last transit to northern Italy to La Spezia. It was my last transit as skipper. The change of command was held on September 17th, 1971, in which Lieutenant Edward N. Bond relieved me as skipper of Tucumcari. When I got back to Little Creek, Virginia, I still had some active duty time left, and so I ended up sailing a desk at Naval Special Warfare Group until my release date. When Tucumcari arrived back in Little Creek, I told Ed Bond that the one thing I never did was to see Tucumcari fly. He told me he'd give me a half-hour head start and give me a flyby if I wanted it. It was phenomenal. It was a kick. I wish my predecessor also had a chance to see Tucumcari fly. It was a sight. The beauty, the silence of her approach, and the roar of her passing were exhilarating. I'm glad I said something to Lieutenant Bond. On my last day of active duty, I got a call from Larry Patella, by the way. He was the captain of the Wood County. He told me to meet him at Admiral Bell's office before I left. No reason given. When I arrived, Larry and his wife Nancy were waiting in the outer office of the Chief of Staff. We chatted and speculated about the call to attend. The Chief of Staff then came in and told us Admiral Bell, again, Confiblant, wanted to see us. We all walked in. Admiral Bell read a citation awarding Lieutenant Commander Patella the Navy Commendation Medal for his service during Tucumcari's deployment. The Admiral took one step forward, actually toward me, and asked, "Do I have to do this?" To which his Chief of Staff responded, "Yes, sir, it's required." At which time Admiral Bell, who had chewed me out less than 2 months before, also awarded me the Navy Commendation Medal. I guess not all the admirals in the Pentagon were upset with me. 33 months aboard with more attaboys than I could count from the Pacific Fleet admirals, and I guess some in the Pentagon. Too much ego from the Atlantic Fleet admirals. But I also had my 15 minutes of fame and then some. You know, when I originally took command of Tucumcari, I set 3 goals for myself and Tucumcari. One, I wanted to find out how fast she'd go. I found out on my last day aboard her, but it may still be classified, so I won't tell it here, but I met my goal. Second, I wanted to refuel at sea while foil-borne from an aircraft carrier, but the slowest foil-borne speed we could go was 32 knots, so I didn't meet that goal, but we did refuel from 2 other U.S. Navy ships, so the goal was kind of half met. Third, I wanted to make an open ocean transit in the company of a mothership for fuel and replenishment. I succeeded in the transit from the west coast of France at Brest, around Gibraltar to the south coast of France at Toulon. The goal was partially met, and I say partially because I would have preferred a longer ocean cruise. Anyway, now I want to tell you a little bit about hydrofoils. They're more than just fast. They're stable. They're highly maneuverable platforms. Fully submerged hydrofoils like Tucumcari and Flagstaff leave no wake at full speed. Tucumcari left only aerated water, and Flagstaff left a small rooster tail. And again, no wake. That's important because transit can be made through a harbor at over 40 knots, and other boats, such as fishing boats, sailboats, other small craft, they're not disturbed at all. The hydrofoil's limited foil-borne draft means they can travel outside designated channels for limited periods to avoid other shipping and still complete a harbor transit in minimal time. Their speed in the open ocean comes in handy when doing search and rescue operations and when attempting to intercept smugglers and other hostile elements. In military applications, like any other ship of the line, hydrofoils can stay on station for extended periods because they have the same ability to replenish, refuel, and rearm at sea. And now, after abandoning the hydrofoil program for decades, last year the U.S. Navy has unveiled its first new hydrofoil program. Clearly, hydrofoils are part of the Navy's future. So let's keep flying and let's keep foil boarding.